Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our conversation today. Our topic is making technology work for you, not against you. I am Tamika Figaro, the moderator for today, and I'm joined by Jeff Gelinas. Hello. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that we'll welcome questions from the public. To ask questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. All microphones and cameras will be muted, so I'll make sure to ask the questions to Jeff and get your answer for you. Jeff is our president of recognition and engagement. He has been in the Engage to Excel group since 2015. His role is overseeing various teams, including the development of Engage to Excel's CXS platform. Prior to that, Jeff has been held into leadership roles at IBM Connexa. He has over 15 years in the HR technology industry. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Tamika, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm actually away from my home office today. I'm in Florida. Great place to be when you're suffering from digital fatigue. So fingers crossed we have no connectivity issues, but again, just really happy to be here. I think it's an important topic, especially as we've had to navigate the pandemic over the last 18 months. That certainly has not helped this topic of digital fatigue at all. So looking forward to being here. Thank you.
All right, so let's get started. First off, Jeff, what are the symptoms of digital fatigue?
Well, that's a good question. And full disclosure, I am not a doctor, but I think we've all experienced some of these symptoms, right? From difficulty focusing to headaches to strained vision, sensitivity to light. These are some of the common symptoms of digital fatigue. I always have to be mindful too of my posture, but poor posture and neck and shoulder pain can also be problematic. Difficulty sleeping. We know that research has shown that if we have a lot of excess screen time, that we can have difficulty sleeping because that's affecting our melatonin levels. So I think organizations need to pay attention to this topic because these symptoms can impact engagement and productivity.
So who is more susceptible to experience digital fatigue and why?
So, I think those who are probably the most susceptible are, those that are at a device for, a particular length of time, aren't taking breaks, whether that's to stand, whether that's to walk, whether that's to get some fresh air, get some exercise. So I think, people who aren't doing those things are more susceptible. I also think we have to be mindful of employees that are doing a lot of repetitive work. So, eye strain can be particular concern there. Also, if you're thinking about, the applications that you're in throughout the day and the amount of switching that you're doing throughout the day, especially if you're switching between, your personal apps and your multiple business apps, we all do it, right? This constant switching can really be tiring and can lead to feelings of anxiety. So I think that, we do have to be mindful of just the amount of times that we're switching between things throughout the day can definitely pose problems with the digital fatigue. And then I also think that, poorly, and I come from a product management background, but those apps that are poorly designed, don't have a good user interface. Let's face it, things like that can really be a drain on you and start to take a toll. So I think that's, another thing that organizations need to look at too, is the experience that they're providing with their various applications.
Yeah, interesting. So why are people suffering from digital fatigue during the pandemic more than ever?
That's a good question. I think that the pandemic has really blurred the lines between work and life. So I think it can be really hard to shut off our devices. I think work from home employees are particularly susceptible if they don't find ways to create that balance. And I think that, we know that we have a lot more people working from home today, and studies have shown that as much as 40% of the US labor force, I'm sure it's similar in other countries as well, continues to work from home. So we've got this massive workforce that's working from home. And then you also have, just with the fact that we haven't been able to do some of the things that we are typically able to do. You're a little bit more cooped up, you're at home, you're spending more time on your devices. And get this, the average time, there was a recent study that showed that the average time that people are spending on their devices is close to 7.5 hours a day.
Wow.
Doing digital media. So, even they're finding that even millennials, are burnt out. They're really kind of the social generation. Even they're burnt out. And if they're working from home, they're finding it really hard to set these boundaries. It's a little bit more of an always on mindset. And so I think that you have to be mindful of that always on mindset and try to find ways to create balance in your life.
Yes. So would you have some tips for anyone who wants to find the balance between working from home and also having time for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I can share some tips that have worked for me, as well as what I think has worked for others from what I've heard. So one thing that I do, and this is helpful, may not work for everybody, but I really try to find ways to act like I'm going to work or I'm leaving work. So, for example, as tempting as it can be to, get up, get out of bed, turn on your laptop, start diving into emails, which, of course happens from time to time, getting the day started with a walk, a hot shower, some focused time with, a cup of coffee or a beverage, just to get uninterrupted thought, I think is really helpful. And then at the end of the day, again, trying to create that activity that kind of creates that separation in between, whether that's another walk at the completion of the day, that can really help. Because I think that for many of us, work, especially knowledge workers, work is endless, right? You're never really completed. There's always things that you can be doing. I know for me, my list is never checked off. It's an endless list. So we have to take steps to create those boundaries. And certainly for me, getting out there and getting some fresh air really, really makes a difference. I think throughout the day, making sure that you're standing. So I like my iWatch because it tells me when I need to stand. If I've been sitting for too long, it pings me and says, hey, you need to get up. And I'll use that opportunity to step away from my desk for a few minutes if I'm able. Your devices, like, my iPhone also tells me my screen time. So pay attention to the insights that your devices are telling you. So I am able to see from week to week how much time I'm spending on my iPhone. Is that increasing? Is that decreasing? Pay attention to what that data is telling you. Another tip, and I learned this from our CEO, try to start meetings not necessarily on the dot, like at the top of the hour, but 5 minutes after. So if you have a 10 o'clock meeting, start it at 10:05, or if it's a 10:30 meeting, 10:35. What that can do is it can give you and your employees time to, take care of a few things, even if that means getting up, stretching, getting a few steps in. So I think it's a great tip that I've certainly done from time to time. Scheduling time on your calendars for, kind of mental health focused breaks, just to, think about, your day, take a breather, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, sometimes just having those scheduled, meetings to just decompress can really help. Closing your eyes. So just, closing your eyes for different periods of time throughout the day to just, focus. Oftentimes we don't have the ability to take a nap throughout the day, but simply closing your eyes for a few minutes can help you bring back energy and help you focus. So those are some things that, have certainly worked for me. And I think the more that we can provide our employees with tips, best practices, these can really help the population.
Mm-hmm. So do you believe it's true that being overly stimulated by screens can lead to a burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've experienced it firsthand. I know others have. And I think the burnout can really take a toll on individual productivity. So whether that's, leading to headaches or other illnesses, I think employers should be mindful of it because it can have some harmful effects. Another thing I didn't mention too is that, if you're spending a lot of time in front of a device too, there are special glasses that you can get. So I don't have a problem with vision per se, but sometimes the sensitivity can be a problem. And so I've purchased some special glasses that I put on throughout the day to just get a little bit of strain out of the system. Again, it's helpful if you're having a lot of time in front of your device.
Yes, and you know what? For me, I experience a lot of pain in my eyes just staring at the screen. So I put a yellow filter, and it helps throughout the day. I can spend more time with my screen, but I noticed that something that really gets a lot of my energy is having face-to-face meetings and being engaged the whole time, because usually when you have a meeting with people in real life, you're not 100% engaged throughout the whole time, but on screen you have to give a little bit
Yes.
more. And that to me is a bit of digital fatigue, just engaging with your screen throughout the day. And I think you gave good tips, just reminding yourself to have some wellness breaks and just going for a walk to detach from the mental activity you give to your screen throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, Tamika, you bring up a really good point, right? Which is, in a lot of these virtual meetings, you want, especially if you're, with your team or your manager, you want to, of course, appear that you're focused and, looking at the screen throughout the meeting. And I certainly try to set examples by turning on video so that people can see me, I can interact with the team. But you bring up an excellent point where, if too much of that, may be a bit of overstimulation. And so think about, from time to time, if there are meetings where it's more of an update, a verbal update, there's nothing, no screen sharing, you may consider just doing a dial in. So I think you're right. I think we have gotten in a good rhythm of being comfortable with video, but too much of it, again, can be part of that digital fatigue problem.
Absolutely. I think managers are doing an amazing job understanding that and, canceling a meeting if you need to cancel it, or if we can talk about it on a call or in an email. So that's a very good point. So is there a way to streamline technological resources in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a good segue, right? Because we've talked about a lot of the problem, but what about solutions, right? What can organizations do to help combat that problem? Of course, one of the things I just mentioned too is making sure that you're sharing tips with your employees. But from an organizational perspective, if you're thinking about streamlining, here are some thoughts. So one is, try to consolidate your technologies where possible. And this, of course, if you're in human resources, probably involves a partnership with your IT team, but combining technology into fewer platforms and channels for your employees will make their lives much easier. It'll also make technology less of a disruption. So take inventory of the different platforms that you're using. Is there any overlap? Is there any ability to bring forces under one roof, so to speak? Because chances are there are some areas that you can consolidate. So I'll just give you an example. I would say probably about 6 months ago, we kind of looked at all the different virtual platforms that we were using. Some people still had WebEx, some people were using Zoom, a lot of people had migrated to Teams, some people had an Office Suite HD meeting account. And we started to take stock of just all the different platforms that we were using for virtual meetings. Organizations around the globe have this problem, right? Where they have a lot of platforms to accomplish the same thing. So again, just really taking stock of everything that you have and trying to consolidate can help tremendously. I also think that looking at the workflows, and this gets a little bit more granular, but see how employees can complete their tasks in a more natural way within their natural flow of work. So for example, if you want to recognize someone by sending them an e-card, for example, instead of having to sign into your recognition and rewards platform, can you do that from Outlook, where you're spending a lot of time throughout your day? So again, too much bouncing around and back and forth can lead to that feeling of being mentally disjointed, which we know can cause anxiety. So I think the more that we can try to do things within the natural flow of work, I think that's really going to help people tremendously. I mentioned it earlier. I think paying attention to the user experience and user interface as you're selecting workplace applications, because we know that negative user experiences can really take a drain. So the user interface is really more of that cosmetic look and feel. It's more the visual design aspects, whereas the experience really pertains more to the different flows and how the user interacts with the technology. So I think paying attention to those things can really help. In addition, integrations. So pursuing integrations where possible. So for example, simple things like single sign-on can really help you go from one app to another without having to log in multiple times. I mean, think about, in a given week, the amount of times that you're logging in to different systems. So again, I think things like single sign-on can really help. And I also think that, considering providers who aren't a one-trick pony. So for example, experience platforms have become a lot more common. I know here at EDE, we combine, onboarding, recognition and rewards, sales incentives, surveys, all on one platform. So as you're thinking about, the providers that you work with, how can you, and this kind of goes along the same theme of the consolidation, but how can you start to bring things together? And so I think that's a real advantage. So those are, I think, some ideas. I know that was a long list of ideas, but hopefully some of those are helpful to you.
Yes. I mean, we had a question. I think you kind of covered it while you were talking and giving out tips. I'm just going to say the question anyway. So all the tips you've provided, Jeff, are really helpful. And as a leader, I can make sure that I'm trying to follow. But do you have recommendations or steps that an employer can take to protect their employee from digital fatigue? So yeah,
I think, that's a great question. And I think that this is an opportunity for HR to provide leadership, on this topic. So doing sessions like this, where you're sharing best practices, you're sharing tips with your employees, it shows them that you care. I know that our HR team publishes a newsletter every month where they share tips around mental health, wellness, et cetera. I think, the more that you can communicate around this topic, make employees feel like they're not alone in experiencing some of these symptoms, I think is really key. And I also think that partnering with your IT team, I mentioned that earlier, to try to consolidate platforms could be really helpful as well.
Mm-hmm. One initiative that Engage to Excel took last year, I think I found was really helpful for me as an employee was we had a challenge. We had to go outside and accumulate the maximum steps we could. And I remember everyone was going out for walks and sharing pictures and sharing their steps. So for me, that was a very helpful way to disconnect from work, get the fresh air, but also participate in the company culture. And that really helped with my digital fatigue, especially coming into COVID. So I thought that was really a very interesting idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Challenges are great. I remember we had, points tied to that challenge
Yeah.
as well. So those that were participants received points, and we had points for the folks that really took charge and had a significant number of steps during that period. But absolutely agree. Challenges are a fun way to engage folks.
Yes. Well, that's all my questions for today, Jeff. I think we covered everything. Let me see if we have other questions.
Wonderful. Do we have any more
Oh,
questions
okay.
about
So we have a question before we leave. Last one before we leave. How can companies prepare for technology being developed while trying to avoid digital fatigue from happening? Great question.
Let's see. So how can companies prepare
Mhm.
technology is being developed? Yeah, so we know that there's going to be, there's going to be innovation, right? There's going to be continued technology disruption. One of the things that you can do is try to be, an early adopter, or try to be a beta tester. So as you get, as you know that if things are coming out, getting a chance to really experience them yourselves, having members of your team experience them, I think really kind of give a window of what's to come. So I think that, a lot of technology companies welcome feedback. So, as you are thinking about what's coming, the more that you can do your research, be prepared, ask questions, get feedback, have end users yourself participate, I think that can be a great strategy. But excellent question.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for participating, asking questions, and being part of the conversation. Thank you, Jeff, for being here, and I hope you enjoy your vacation. I
Thank you
really
very much,
appreciate
Tamika.
you taking the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
happy to
so
join. Thank you, everybody.
yeah, of course. I'm gonna close this out. I hope everyone found it insightful, and we hope to see you next time.